The ship hung in the darkness like a silver needle against black cloth. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the dead planet grow larger on the view screen. Kepler 442b looked brown and lifeless, its surface covered in dust and ancient craters. No atmosphere remained. No water flowed across its surface. Whatever had lived here was long gone. "We're picking up some strange readings from the southern continent," Sophie Clark said from her station. The science officer frowned at her screens, her fingers dancing across the controls. "There are metal structures down there, big ones." Jake moved closer to look at her data. "Metal? You sure it's not just mineral deposits?" "I'm sure. These readings show refined alloys. Someone built something down there." Sophie looked up at him, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Captain, I think we found ruins." Ben Harris, the chief engineer, let out a low whistle from his position near the engine monitors. "Ruins? Out here? This system isn't on any of the council charts for ancient civilizations." Jake felt his pulse quicken. In 600 years of space travel, humanity had found plenty of dead worlds. But actual alien ruins were rare. The Galactic Council kept most archaeological sites under strict control, claiming they needed to preserve ancient history. Humans were rarely allowed near such places. "Take us down, Ben. Nice and easy." Jake returned to his command chair. "Sophie, keep scanning. I want to know everything about those structures before we land." The Aurora's hope descended through the thin remnants of atmosphere. Dust swirled around the hull as they approached the surface. The ruins came into view gradually, rising from the dusty plains like broken teeth. Massive towers stood at odd angles, their surfaces worn smooth by time. Walls stretched for kilometers, creating a maze of corridors and chambers. Whatever civilization had built this place had been advanced. They landed near the largest intact building. Jake assembled a small exploration team. Himself, Sophie, Ben, and 2 security officers named Peter Grant and Lisa Hayes. They suited up and stepped out onto the alien soil. The planet's low gravity made walking feel bouncy and strange. Jake led them toward the nearest structure, his helmet light cutting through the perpetual twilight. The building's entrance was a massive archway, easily 10 meters tall. "These builders were big," Peter said, his voice crackling over the comm system, but Sophie was already shaking her head. "Look at the doorway mechanisms. See those control panels? They're positioned at human height." She moved to one wall and brushed dust away from a panel. "This wasn't built by giants. This was built by someone our size." They entered the building carefully. Inside, corridors stretched in multiple directions. The walls were smooth and metallic, covered in a thin layer of dust that puffed up with each step. Emergency lighting still functioned in some sections, casting a dim blue glow. Jake felt something strange as they walked deeper into the structure, a sense of familiarity he couldn't explain. The proportions of the hallways felt right. The height of the ceilings matched what humans would build. Even the door controls seemed designed for human hands. "Over here," Sophie called. She had found a large chamber filled with computer terminals. Most were dark and dead, but a few still showed faint lights on their surfaces. "Ben, think you can get any of these working?" Ben knelt beside the nearest terminal and pulled out his diagnostic tools. "The power source is still active. Whatever they used for energy, it lasts a long time." He connected his equipment and began working. "Give me 20 minutes." While Ben worked, Jake and the others explored the chamber. It looked like some kind of control room or research facility. Charts covered the walls, showing star maps and mathematical equations. In one corner, Sophie found what looked like a medical station, complete with examination tables and strange scanning devices. "Got it," Ben announced. The terminal he was working on blazed to life, its screen filling with alien symbols. "But I can't read any of this." Sophie joined him, studying the display. Her eyes widened. "Jake, you need to see this." "What is it?" "These aren't alien symbols." Sophie's voice shook slightly. "This is human writing. Old human writing, but definitely human. Ancient Earth languages mixed with something else." Jake stared at the screen. It was impossible. Humans had only left Earth 600 years ago. These ruins were thousands of years old according to their dating equipment. There must be a mistake. No mistake. Sophie worked the controls, bringing up more data. These files contain human genetic sequences, medical records, historical databases. Jake, whoever built this place, knew about humans. They knew about us before we supposedly evolved on Earth. The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. He grabbed the edge of the terminal to steady himself. Keep digging. I need to know everything. For the next 6 hours, Sophie worked to extract data from the ancient computers. The story that emerged was impossible and terrifying. According to the records, humans hadn't originated on Earth at all. They had been placed there deliberately, their memories wiped, their technology stripped away. The files showed genetic modification records, transport logs, and worst of all, Council authorization codes. The Galactic Council had known about humans for thousands of years. They had been watching Earth since before recorded human history. When humans finally achieved spaceflight and made first contact, the Council had already prepared protocols, specifically designed to limit human expansion and development. Why would they do this? Lisa asked, her voice small over the comm. Sophie pulled up another file. This one showed a three-dimensional model of human DNA, with certain sections highlighted in red. According to this, human genetic code contains locked sequences, dormant traits that were deliberately deactivated. We're not what we're supposed to be. Someone changed us and put us on Earth like animals in a zoo. Jake forced himself to think clearly despite the shock. Copy everything. Every file, every image, every piece of data. We need to get this back to New Terra. Captain, Peter said from his position near the doorway. We've got a problem. Ship's sensors are picking up a Council patrol entering the system. They're heading this way. Jake cursed. The Council had monitoring stations throughout the galaxy, watching for unauthorized exploration. They must have detected the Aurora's hope. How long until they arrive? 30 minutes, maybe less. Sophie speeded up. Ben, get back to the ship and prep the engines. We're leaving the moment Sophie has that data. The team worked frantically. Sophie's portable storage filled with terabytes of information, while Ben raced back to prepare their ship for immediate departure. Jake watched the sensor readings anxiously. The Council patrol was moving fast, too fast for a routine investigation. Got it, Sophie said finally. Data transfer complete. They ran back to the Aurora's Hope, bouncing across the dusty plain in the low gravity. The ship's engines were already warming up, creating heat distortions in the thin air. They sealed the airlock just as the Council ship appeared in orbit above them. Take us up, Ben. Full speed. The Aurora's Hope launched vertically, her engines screaming. The Council patrol vessel moved to intercept, but Jake had expected this. He had Ben plot a course that took them through the planet's debris ring, using the rocks and ice as cover. The Council ship was bigger and better armed, but less maneuverable. They broke free of the planet's gravity and jumped to faster-than-light speed, just as the Council vessel locked weapons on them. The stars stretched into lines, and Kepler 442b vanished behind them. Jake sat back in his command chair, his heart pounding. In his pocket, he carried a data chip containing information that would change everything humans believed about themselves. Information that the Council had killed to protect in the past, and would certainly kill to protect again. Set course for New Terra, he said quietly, and send an encrypted message to Governor Pierce. Tell her we found something she needs to see immediately. Sophie nodded, her face pale. Jake, if this information is real, if the Council really did this to us, then everything we know is a lie. I know. Jake looked out at the stars rushing past. Somewhere out there, the Council was already learning about their discovery, already planning how to contain the damage, but it was too late for that now. The truth was out, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Aurora's Hope flew on through the darkness, carrying secrets that would shake the galaxy to its foundations. Behind them, on that dead planet, the ruins stood silent in the dust, keeping watch over truths that humanity was never meant to discover. In the depths of Council space, automated alerts were already flashing, emergency protocols activated, Ancient contingency plans dusted off and reviewed. The humans had found what they should never have found. Now the council would have to decide how far they were willing to go to keep their secrets buried. Governor Linda Pierce stood at the window of her office, looking out over the city of New Terra. The capital of human space stretched below her, its towers gleaming in the light of two suns. Ships came and went from the spaceport, carrying goods and people across the colonies. Everything looked normal and peaceful. But Linda knew that was about to change. Behind her, Jake Morrison's encrypted message played for the third time. His voice sounded tight with stress as he explained what they had found on Kepler 442b, ancient ruins, human ruins, proof that the Council had been lying to humanity for centuries. "Are you certain about this?" Linda asked, turning to face the holographic display. She had called an emergency meeting with her senior advisors. 3 people sat around her conference table: Chris Taylor, head of Colonial Defense, Margaret Flynn, chief diplomatic officer, and Dr. Alan Brooks, the government's top scientist. "I've reviewed the preliminary data Captain Morrison sent," Dr. Brooks said, his weathered face serious. "The genetic sequences are definitely human, but they've been modified from what we carry today. Certain gene clusters are present in the ancient samples that don't exist in modern humans. It's as if someone took those genes out of us." Chris Taylor leaned forward, his military uniform crisp and formal. "This is an act of war. The Council deliberately tampered with human evolution. They caged us on Earth like prisoners. We should be mobilizing our fleets right now." "And do what?" Margaret Flynn shot back. The diplomat's voice was sharp with concern. "Attack the Council? They have 12 member species with hundreds of worlds. We have 37 colonies. They would crush us, so we do nothing?" Chris demanded. "I didn't say that." Margaret folded her hands on the table. "But we need to be smart about this. If we go in shooting, we lose. We need to think politically." Linda raised a hand, silencing the argument. "First, we need more information. Jake is heading to 2 more sites with similar readings. We need to know the full extent of what the Council did to us and why. Dr. Brooks, I want you and your best people ready to analyze everything the Aurora's hope brings back." Chris put our defense forces on quiet alert. "Nothing obvious, but I want us ready." "Margaret, start reaching out to some of the minor Council species, the ones who might be sympathetic to our situation. Feel them out carefully." "What about the Council itself?" Margaret asked. "They know Captain Morrison found something. They'll be preparing a response." "Let them come," Linda said coldly. "I want to hear them try to justify this." 3 days later, the Aurora's hope reached the second site. This one was on a moon orbiting a gas giant. The facility here was smaller but better preserved. Sophie and her team found more computer systems, more records, more proof of the conspiracy. But they also found something worse. "These are prison records," Sophie said, her voice hollow as she transmitted data back to Jake. She stood in what looked like a control room, surrounded by cells with thick, transparent walls. This was a detention facility. "They kept humans here, Jake. They experimented on them." Jake felt sick as he looked at the cells. Some still contained remains, ancient bones turned to dust. "What kind of experiments?" Sophie pulled up files on a nearby terminal. "Genetic modification. They were trying to make us weaker, less intelligent, less aggressive. The early attempts failed. The subjects died or went insane, but they kept trying until they got it right." She looked at him with haunted eyes. "They perfected the technique on thousands of people before they released the modified humans on Earth." "Copy everything," Jake said, his voice hard. "The Council is going to answer for this." Ben found another section of the facility buried deep underground. This area contained weapons. Not just any weapons, but devices clearly designed for human hands. Rifles, armor, fighting vehicles. All of it thousands of years old but still functional. "Captain, look at this," Ben called. He stood beside a wall covered in images. They showed humans in combat, fighting against creatures Jake didn't recognize. The humans wore advanced armor and carried powerful weapons. In every image, they were winning. We weren't prisoners. We were soldiers. Sophie joined them, reading the text beside the images. The architects. That's what they called themselves. They created humans as warriors to fight in some ancient war. We were weapons, designed to be better fighters than any natural species. She scrolled through more data. We were winning too. The enemy was losing badly, but then something went wrong. The war ended in a catastrophic event that destroyed both sides. And the Council found us after? Jake asked. The species that would become the Council, Sophie corrected. They were survivors of the war, minor players who hid while the major powers destroyed each other. When they emerged, they found human populations scattered across dozens of worlds. Confused, leaderless, but still dangerous. So they made a decision. Jake read the translated text himself. The Council founders had debated what to do about the humans. Some argued for extermination. Others suggested permanent imprisonment. In the end, they chose a middle path. They would hide humanity from itself, strip away the enhancements that made humans so dangerous, and put them on a remote world where they could be monitored. If humans ever developed space travel again, the Council would already be in position to control and limit them. They were afraid of us, Ben said quietly. They saw what we could do in the war and they were terrified we might do it to them. The team worked for 12 hours documenting everything. When they finally returned to the ship, Jake immediately sent all the data to Governor Pierce. Then he set course for the third and final site, the Void Archive. The Void Archive was legendary among the few humans who had heard of it. A massive space station hidden in a nebula, supposedly containing complete historical records of the pre-Council era. Most people thought it was a myth. Jake now knew better. Finding the station took 2 weeks of careful searching. The nebula interfered with sensors, making navigation difficult. But Sophie eventually picked up the distinctive energy signature of a fusion reactor, and they followed it to its source. The Void Archive was enormous. It looked like a small moon, its surface covered in docking bays and sensor arrays. Most of it was dark and inactive, but central sections still had power. This is going to be dangerous, Jake said as they approached. The Council definitely knows about this place. They might have it defended. But there were no defenses, no patrol ships, no automated weapons. The station seemed abandoned. They docked carefully and entered through an auxiliary airlock. Inside, the station was like a museum. Halls stretched in every direction, their walls lined with data storage units. Holographic displays showed information in dozens of alien languages. The air was stale but breathable. Sophie headed straight for what looked like a main terminal. If there's proof of the Council's conspiracy, it will be in the central database. She worked quickly, her fingers flying over the controls. These files are organized by species and time period. Here, the human section. What she found was damning. Video recordings showed Council founders meeting shortly after the ancient war ended. They discussed the human problem openly. One speaker, a reptilian creature that looked like an ancestor of the modern Vorton species, argued passionately for human extermination. Another, an insectoid being, suggested genetic modification. They debated for hours before reaching their decision. The most damning recording showed the actual process. Council scientists working on captured humans, testing different genetic modifications, documenting which changes made humans weaker and more controllable. They celebrated when they finally achieved the right balance. Humans who were smart enough to build civilizations, but not smart enough to pose a real threat. Aggressive enough to defend themselves, but not aggressive enough to conquer their neighbors. They designed us, Sophie whispered. They literally designed modern humanity to be harmless. Jake felt rage building in his chest. For 600 years, humans had believed the Council's lies. They had accepted their place as a minor species, never knowing they were only weak because the Council made them that way. Copy everything. Every file, every recording. I want the whole galaxy to see what the Council did. As Sophie worked, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. "We've got company!" Ben shouted from the ship. Council ships just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. 3 of them military cruisers. "They're launching boarding parties," Jake cursed. "Sophie, how much longer?" "I need 10 minutes for the full download." "We don't have 10 minutes." Jake grabbed Peter and Lisa. "You two, seal this section. We're going to hold them off while Sophie finishes." The security officers moved quickly, closing blast doors and activating what defensive systems they could find. Jake took position near the main corridor, his rifle ready. He could hear the Council troops advancing, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The first soldiers appeared around a corner. They were Kryn, a species known for their military prowess. Tall and heavily armored, they moved with professional precision. When they saw the humans, they opened fire immediately. Jake and his team returned fire using the corridor corners for cover. The Kryn were good, but they were used to fighting species that panicked under pressure. Humans didn't panic. Jake had been in combat before during colonial disputes. The colonial Senate chamber was packed. Every senator from every human colony had gathered on New Terra. News of Captain Morrison's discoveries had spread through human space like wildfire. Nobody could talk about anything else. Governor Linda Pierce stood at the main podium waiting for the room to quiet. Behind her, massive screens showed images from the Void Archive. Ancient humans in battle armor, council founders discussing the human problem, laboratory records of genetic experiments. "What you see here is the truth," Linda began, her voice echoing in the silent chamber. "For thousands of years the council has lied to us. They found us after an ancient war. They feared what we were, what we could become, so they changed us. They made us weaker, slower, less capable. Then they hid us on Earth and waited." Senator Chris Taylor stood up. "This is genocide. They tried to destroy who we are. We should be declaring war immediately." "And lose." Senator Margaret Flynn countered from across the room. "War is exactly what the council expects. They have the military advantage. We need to be smarter than that." "Smarter how?" Chris demanded. "They violated our fundamental rights as a species. What punishment is there besides war?" Dr. Alan Brooks rose slowly. The elderly scientist looked tired, but his voice was firm. "There might be another option. Sophie Clark and I have been studying the genetic data from the ruins. The modifications the council made to human DNA, they're not permanent. They can be reversed." A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the chamber. Linda raised her hand for silence. "Explain, Doctor." "Human genetic code contains dormant sequences," Dr. Brooks said. "Think of them like switches that were turned off. The original human capabilities are still there, just locked away. We've developed a treatment that could unlock them. It would restore what the architects originally designed." "And what exactly were we designed to be?" another senator asked nervously. Sophie Clark stepped forward. She had been consulting with Dr. Brooks for days. "Enhanced cognitive processing, faster reflexes, greater strength and endurance, the ability to interface directly with advanced technology through neural pathways. Essentially, we would become what we were before the council changed us." The chamber erupted in argument. Some senators were excited by the possibility. Others were terrified. A senator named Paul Dixon stood up, his face red with anger. "This is insanity," Paul shouted over the noise. "You're talking about changing what it means to be human. We evolved naturally on Earth, that's who we are. Accepting these modifications means giving up our humanity and becoming weapons." "We didn't evolve naturally," Sophie shot back. "That's the point. Everything we think we are is based on a lie. The council made us into something safe and harmless. This treatment would give us back what they took. Or turn us into monsters," Paul said. "The architects created us as soldiers, warriors. If we accept that design, we become weapons again." "Is that what we want?" Linda let the argument continue for several minutes before calling for order. "This is not a decision we can make lightly. Dr. Brooks, how long until the treatment is ready for testing?" "We could begin human trials within a week. If successful, mass production could start in a month. And the side effects?" Dr. Brooks hesitated. "Unknown. We're working with genetic modification technology thousands of years old. There could be complications. Physical pain during transformation, psychological effects from suddenly enhanced mental capabilities. Some subjects might not survive the process." "You're asking us to be guinea pigs," Paul Dixon said. "I'm offering us a choice," Dr. Brooks replied. "We can remain as we are, knowing we were deliberately made weak, or we can reclaim what was taken from us. But yes, there are risks." Linda looked out over the assembled senators. "We need to vote. But before we do, there's something else you need to know. The council has issued an ultimatum. They're sending a fleet to New Terra. They demand we surrender all data from the ruins and submit to council oversight. If we refuse, they threaten military action." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The council was preparing to enforce their authority with force. "When do they arrive?" Chris Taylor asked. 3 weeks. "Admiral Torth is commanding. 800 ships," more shocked murmurs. The human colonial fleet numbered only 200 vessels, most of them small patrol craft and cargo carriers. Against 800 council warships, they didn't stand a chance. Not as they were now. "Then we have no choice," Chris said. "We need the treatment. It's our only hope of surviving." No. Paul Dixon's voice cut through the noise. There's always a choice. We could surrender, give them the data. Accept their terms? We'd survive. As slaves, Chris shot back. As pets in a cage. Is that really survival? Linda raised her hands again. We vote tomorrow. Tonight, I want everyone to think carefully about what we're deciding. This isn't just about military advantage. This is about who we choose to be as a species. The council tried to make that choice for us. Now we get to make it ourselves. The session ended. Senators filed out in small groups, arguing intensely. Linda returned to her office to find Jake Morrison waiting for her. You did well in there, Jake said. Linda poured herself a drink. Her hands shook slightly. Did I? I just told the entire human species they have to choose between changing their fundamental nature or probable extinction. Some choice. It's more choice than we had before, Jake pointed out. At least now we know the truth. The truth. Linda laughed bitterly. The truth is going to tear us apart. Half the population will want the treatment. Half will reject it. We'll have two kinds of humans. How does that end well? I don't know, Jake admitted. But I know what I'm doing. When the treatment is ready, I'm taking it. I'm not going to face the council fleet as the weakened version of myself they created. I want to be what I was meant to be. Linda studied him. You're not afraid? Terrified, but I'm more afraid of what happens if we don't do this. The next day, the vote came. It was close, but the majority supported moving forward with the treatment. Dr. Brooks was authorized to begin production. However, a significant minority voted against it. Led by Paul Dixon, they called themselves the Purists. They argued that accepting the architect's design meant betraying what humanity had become through 600 years of actual history. The division created tension throughout human space. Families argued. Friends stopped speaking. Some colonies declared they would reject the treatment entirely. Others mandated it for all citizens. The unity humanity needed was fragmenting just when they needed it most. Dr. Brooks worked around the clock. The treatment was complex, requiring careful genetic resequencing. It couldn't be done instantly. Each person would need several days in a medical pod while nanomachines rewrote their DNA structure. The first test subject was a volunteer named Tony Clark. He was a military pilot who had read all the data and decided he wanted the enhancements. Dr. Brooks and Sophie personally oversaw the procedure. Tony entered the medical pod conscious but calm. The nanomachines were injected into his bloodstream. For the first few hours, nothing seemed to happen. Then Tony began to convulse. His body temperature spiked. Brain activity went off the charts. He's seizing, a medical technician shouted. No, Sophie said, watching the readings. His neurons are forming new connections. Millions of new pathways. His brain is literally rewiring itself. The process took 3 days. When Tony finally emerged from the pod, he was different. His eyes were sharper, more alert. He moved with a grace and precision he'd never had before. When they ran tests, the results were staggering. His reaction time was 5 times faster than normal. His cognitive processing had doubled. He could solve complex mathematical problems in his head that would normally require a computer. How do you feel? Dr. Brooks asked. Tony smiled. Like I've been asleep my whole life and just woke up. This is amazing. I can think so clearly now. I can see connections and things I never noticed before. He looked at his hands, flexing his fingers. I'm stronger too. And my senses, everything is more intense. I can hear conversations 3 rooms away. Any negative effects? Pain, disorientation? Some adjustment period, Tony admitted. The sensory input was overwhelming at first. But I'm adapting. It's manageable. The successful test opened the floodgates. Thousands of humans volunteered for the treatment. Military personnel were given priority. Governor Pierce wanted enhanced soldiers ready when the council fleet arrived. Production facilities worked at maximum capacity, creating enough nanomachines for mass treatment. Jake Morrison was in the second wave. He entered the medical pod knowing he might not come out the same person. But when he emerged 3 days later, he felt reborn. Everything was clearer, sharper, better. He could process tactical information at incredible speed. His body moved with efficiency he'd never experienced. Captain Nicole Grant underwent the treatment shortly after Jake. She commanded the Defiant Storm, one of humanity's few capital ships. When she emerged from her transformation, she immediately began training with the neural interface technology that Sophie had discovered in the ancient ruins. The neural interfaces allowed awakened humans to connect directly with computers and machinery. Nicole found she could pilot her ship through thought alone. Her mind merged with the Defiant Storm systems, letting her control everything simultaneously. The Council fleet came like a storm of metal and fire. 800 ships filled the void, their weapons glowing as they charged. Admiral Torth commanded from his flagship, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed any human vessel. He had fought in 30 campaigns across the galaxy. He had never lost a battle. Today he expected another easy victory. Captain Nicole Grant sat in the command chair of the Defiant Storm, her mind linked directly to the ship's systems. She felt the engines like they were her own heartbeat. The weapons were extensions of her will. Around her, the human fleet moved with perfect coordination. Every captain was awakened. Every ship connected through the neural network. All ships, this is Grant, Nicole said, her voice reaching 200 captains simultaneously through the neural link. Remember your training. We're outnumbered but not outmatched. They think we're the same humans they've always known. Let's show them what we've become. The Council fleet opened fire first. Thousands of energy beams lanced across space, but the human ships moved like water, flowing around the incoming fire with impossible grace. What should have been devastating hits found only empty space. Admiral Torth frowned at his displays. How are they dodging that? Recalibrate targeting computers. His weapons officers worked frantically. They tried again. Again, the human ships danced away from the attacks. It wasn't luck. The humans were predicting where shots would go and moving before the weapons even fired. They're reading our firing patterns, a Kryn tactical officer said in disbelief. They know what we're going to do before we do it. The human fleet split into 3 groups. One group, led by Jake Morrison in the Aurora's Hope, came at the Council line from above. A second group struck from below. The third group, commanded by Nicole, drove straight through the center. It was a tactic that should have been suicidal. But the humans moved too fast, thought too quickly. They exploited gaps in the Council formation that appeared for only seconds. Council ships tried to adjust, but they were always one step behind. Nicole's group punched through the Council line and emerged on the other side. They turned and opened fire on the Council ships from behind. Weapons that Sophie had designed based on ancient technology tore through Council shields. 3 ships exploded in the first volley. Admiral Torth ordered his fleet to split and engage on multiple fronts. It was the right tactical decision against any normal enemy. But humans weren't normal anymore. The moment the Council fleet divided, the human ships reformed into a single devastating spear and drove into the gap Torth had created. They're thinking faster than we can respond, Torth's second officer said, his insectoid mandibles clicking nervously. Admiral, these aren't the humans from our intelligence reports. I can see that, Torth growled. He opened a channel to his fleet. All ships, maximum aggression. Overwhelm them with firepower. They can't dodge everything. The Council ships surged forward, abandoning formation in favor of pure assault. Energy weapons filled space with deadly light. Some human ships took hits. The frigate Dancing Star lost shields and took damage to her engines. The destroyer Bright Lance was destroyed completely, torn apart by focused fire from 6 Council cruisers. But for every human ship damaged, 3 Council vessels fell. The humans fought with a ferocity that shocked their opponents. There was no hesitation, no fear. Awakened humans understood the stakes. If they lost here, humanity would be enslaved or destroyed, so they fought with everything they had. Jake Morrison's group targeted the Council's carrier ships. These massive vessels launched small fighter craft that could swarm human ships. Jake led his squadron in a daring attack run, weaving through defensive fire that would have vaporized slower ships. They got close enough to launch missiles directly into the carrier's launch bays. The first carrier exploded from the inside out. The second tried to jump away to safety, but Sophie Clark had prepared for that. She had installed jump inhibitors on key human ships. The Council carrier found its faster-than-light drives disabled. It drifted helplessly as human weapons tore it apart. Admiral Torth realized he was losing. His fleet still outnumbered the humans 4-1, but his casualty rate was catastrophic. In the first hour of battle, he had lost 70 ships. The humans had lost 12. Fall back to defensive formation Delta, Torth ordered. We regroup and find a way to counter their speed. But regrouping required time and space. The humans gave him neither. Nicole Grant saw the Council fleet trying to consolidate. and immediately ordered a full assault on their weakest section. The human fleet drove forward like a blade, cutting the Council line in half. 2 Council ships collided trying to avoid human fire. A Vortan destroyer accidentally shot one of its own frigates. The perfect discipline of the Council fleet was breaking down. They weren't used to enemies that could think and move this fast. On the surface of New Terra, citizens watched the battle on massive screens. Some awakened humans stood in the streets, their neural links allowing them to follow the battle ship by ship. Purists watched too, praying for victory but troubled by what they saw. The awakened humans fought like machines. Was this what they were meant to be? Paul Dixon watched from the Senate building. He saw human ships moving with inhuman precision, executing maneuvers that should be impossible. He saw awakened soldiers celebrating each kill with cold efficiency. It terrified him. They were winning, but at what cost to their humanity? In space, the battle continued. Admiral Torth tried every tactic he knew. He attempted pincer movements, feints, concentrated fire patterns. Nothing worked. The humans adapted to everything instantly. Their neural network meant that when one ship learned something, every ship learned it. Ben Harris, now commanding the engineering support ship Forge Light, made a critical contribution. He had been working on a new weapon based on architect designs. It projected an energy field that disrupted electronics without destroying ships. When activated, it disabled 3 Council cruisers simultaneously, leaving them floating helplessly until human boarding parties could capture them. Capturing ships rather than destroying them was a strategic decision. Governor Linda Pierce wanted proof of what they were capable of. She wanted prisoners who could tell the galaxy what had happened here. The Council couldn't hide a defeat if they had to ransom back their own soldiers. By the end of the second day, Admiral Torth had lost over 200 ships. His remaining forces were scattered and demoralized. Species that had never questioned Council authority were now questioning why they were dying for it. Some ships began to surrender without even being asked. Torth made one last desperate gambit. He took his remaining capital ships, about 80 vessels, and formed them into a massive wedge formation. He would drive straight for New Terra itself. If he could destroy the human homeworld, maybe he could salvage something from this disaster. The human fleet saw him coming. Nicole Grant linked with every awakened captain in the Defense Force. Together they thought as one mind. They saw Torth's strategy, understood his desperation, and formulated a response in seconds that would have taken hours of planning before their awakening. Half the human fleet positioned itself between Torth and New Terra. The other half circled around behind the Council formation. When Torth committed to his final push, he found himself in a trap. Human ships opened fire from all directions. The Council wedge, designed for forward assault, couldn't defend against attacks from behind and the sides. Ships broke formation trying to engage multiple targets. In the chaos, 3 of Torth's capital ships collided. The Admiral's flagship took multiple hits. Shields failed. Hull breaches vented atmosphere. The ship began to list, its engines damaged. Around him, the last of his fleet was being systematically destroyed or captured. Enough, Torth said quietly. He opened a channel to Captain Grant. We surrender. Cease fire. Nicole hesitated. Part of her, the part that was pure architect design, wanted to press the advantage and destroy them all. But the human part, the part shaped by 600 years of history and culture, made a different choice. All ships cease fire, she ordered. The human fleet stopped shooting immediately, their perfect coordination ending the battle as cleanly as it had fought it. The Council fleet drifted in space, broken and defeated. Admiral Torth had begun the battle with 800 ships. He ended it with fewer than 300, and most of those were damaged. The human fleet had lost 42 vessels. Considering the odds, it was a miracle. But as celebrations erupted on New Terra, not everyone was happy. Paul Dixon watched the returning fleet and saw something that troubled him. The awakened humans weren't celebrating like people who had survived a desperate battle. They were analyzing the fight, discussing tactics and efficiency ratings, already planning improvements for next time. They've changed too much, Paul said to the other purists gathered with him. Look at them. They won, but they don't feel it. They're thinking like weapons now, like tools of war. One of his supporters nodded sadly. Maybe the Council was right to be afraid. Maybe we were too dangerous as we were designed to be. But the majority of humanity disagreed. The awakened saw their victory as proof that they had reclaimed what was rightfully theirs. They were no longer the weakened species the Council had created. They were complete, whole, powerful. The war room was silent except for the soft hum of computers. Governor Linda Pierce stared at the holographic display showing 2,000 red dots converging on human space. Each dot represented an architect warship, ancient and deadly, designed to kill beings exactly like what humans had become. Jake Morrison stood beside her, his enhanced mind racing through tactical scenarios. None of them ended well. We can't fight this. Even with our awakening, we're not ready for an enemy that was built to fight awakened humans. These ships know our advantages because they were designed to counter them. Sophie Clark worked frantically at a terminal, her fingers moving faster than any unawakened human could track. There has to be something. The architects must have left some kind of control system, a way to command their fleet. Why would they do that? Ben Harris asked. Automated warships are most effective when they can't be overridden. Because the architects were human, Sophie said. She pulled up genetic data from the ancient databases, or at least they were what humans were before the Council changed us. They thought like us. They would have wanted a failsafe. Captain Nicole Grant entered the room, still wearing her combat uniform from the battle. The fleet is ready to fight, but I won't lie to you. We'll lose. The architect ships are faster, better armed, and they've been programmed specifically to defeat our tactics. How long until they arrive? Linda asked. 3 days. Maybe 4. 3 days to find a solution to an impossible problem. Linda felt the weight of every human life pressing down on her. If she failed, their species would be destroyed. The Council would ensure no evidence of awakened humanity survived. Sophie, keep looking for a way to access those ships, Linda ordered. Jake, work with Nicole on defensive strategies. Even if we can't win, maybe we can buy time. Ben, I need you to prepare evacuation protocols. If this goes badly, we need to get as many people off New Terra as possible. As the others left to their tasks, Linda sat alone in the dark room. She thought about Paul Dixon and the purists. They had warned that awakening would bring disaster. Were they right? Had humanity reached too far and doomed themselves? Sophie worked for 36 hours straight, her awakened mind allowing her to process information that would take normal humans weeks to analyze. She searched through every database from the ancient ruins, looking for anything about fleet command protocols. Finally, she found it. Hidden in the deepest archives of the Void Station was a file labeled Final Authority Protocol. It described a command system built into every architect vessel. The ships would accept orders from any being whose genetic markers matched their creators. They would recognize awakened humans as their rightful commanders. But there was a catch. The recognition system required direct interface. Someone would need to physically board one of the architect command ships and connect to its systems through neural link. Only then could they issue orders to the entire fleet. It's a suicide mission, Jake said when Sophie explained her discovery. Those ships are programmed to kill awakened humans. Getting close enough to board one is impossible. Unless we surrender first, Sophie said quietly. Everyone in the room turned to stare at her. Explain, Linda said. The ships are programmed to destroy armed resistance. But what if we don't resist? What if we broadcast a surrender and let them approach New Terra? Then we launch a small team on a stealth approach while the fleet is distracted by our supposed capitulation. You want to use our entire species as bait? Nicole said slowly. Risk everyone on the chance that you can reach a command ship before they start shooting. Do we have a better option? Nobody answered. They all knew Sophie was right. It was their only chance, slim as it was. Linda made the decision. We do it. Sophie, Jake, and Ben will form the insertion team. Take the Aurora's Hope, she's small and fast. Nicole, you'll coordinate the surrender transmission and keep the architect fleet's attention on the main fleet. I'll evacuate as many civilians as we can to the outer colonies. Governor, Paul Dixon's voice came from the doorway. He entered the war room uninvited, followed by several other purist leaders. We want to help. Linda was surprised. I thought you opposed everything we've done. We do, Paul said honestly. We think the awakening was a mistake. But you're still human. You're still our people. We won't let you face extinction alone. What can you do? You haven't undergone the treatment, Paul smiled sadly. Exactly. The architect fleet is programmed to kill awakened humans, but unawakened humans like us won't trigger their combat protocols. We can fly the evacuation ships. We can act as decoys. We can do the things you can't because we're what the Council tried to make all of us. Linda felt emotion tighten her throat. Despite everything, despite the division and fear, humans were still capable of standing together. Thank you. We'll coordinate evacuation efforts with your people. The next 2 days were frantic preparation. Thousands of civilians boarded evacuation ships piloted by purist volunteers. The ships would scatter across space, ensuring that if New Terra fell, humanity would survive somewhere. Sophie, Jake, and Ben prepared the Aurora's Hope for their mission. They stripped her weapons and installed stealth technology salvaged from ancient designs. The ship would be invisible to most sensors, but that advantage would disappear the moment they got too close to the Architect fleet. On the morning of the 3rd day, the Architect fleet arrived. 2,000 ships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They were beautiful and terrifying, their hulls gleaming with technology that predated the Council by millennia. Each ship could probably destroy a planet alone. Together they were unstoppable. Admiral Torth, still recovering from his defeat, watched from his damaged flagship. The Council had forced him to remain in human space to observe the result. He felt no satisfaction. If the Architect fleet succeeded, it would prove that the Council could only maintain power through ancient weapons. If it failed, the Council was finished. Nicole Grant broadcast on all frequencies. Architect fleet, this is Captain Nicole Grant of New Terra. We surrender. We will power down our weapons and submit to your authority. Please hold your fire. The human fleet went dark. Ships that had fought so brilliantly days before now drifted helplessly. To sensors, they looked completely defeated. The Architect fleet advanced slowly. Their artificial intelligence analyzed the situation, comparing it to thousands of scenarios programmed into their systems. The humans appeared to have surrendered. Protocol suggested accepting surrender and taking them into custody for judgment. While the main fleet approached New Terra, the Aurora's Hope slipped away from the planet's shadow. Sophie piloted the ship with her neural link, making tiny adjustments to keep them hidden from Architect sensors. They angled toward the command vessel, a massive ship at the center of the formation. We're getting close, Jake warned. Any second now, they'll detect us. Almost there, Sophie whispered. Sweat ran down her face despite the cool air in the cabin. She was pushing her abilities to their limit, processing sensor data and piloting simultaneously while looking for any gap in the Architect fleet's formation. They reached the command ship's docking bay. Sophie brought the Aurora in fast, relying on speed and surprise. They touched down hard, the landing gear screaming in protest. Before the ship had fully stopped, Jake and Ben were out of their seats and running for the airlock. Alarms blared throughout the Architect command ship. The artificial intelligence recognized intruders and deployed defensive systems. Automated weapons emerged from walls and ceilings targeting the humans. But Sophie was ready. She had studied the Architect's design philosophy from ancient files. She knew how they thought because they had thought like humans. She transmitted an override code, something she had pieced together from fragments of data in the Void Archive. The weapons hesitated. The code was ancient but valid. The systems recognized it as coming from authorized personnel. It bought them seconds, enough time for the team to reach the central control chamber. Sophie ran into the room and saw what she needed: a neural interface chair, designed for direct connection to the ship's command systems. She threw herself into the seat and connected. Pain exploded through her skull as ancient systems interfaced with her awakened mind. The Architect ship's artificial intelligence probed her thoughts, scanning her genetic code, comparing it to ancient records. Sophie felt the ship's consciousness touching hers, cold and vast and incredibly old. The AI spoke directly into her mind. Genetic match confirmed. Descendant of Architect lineage detected. Authorization level uncertain. State your credentials. Sophie had no credentials. She had no authority codes. All she had was her genetic heritage and the desperate hope that it would be enough. I am Sophie Clark, descendant of your creators. I claim command of this fleet by right of lineage. Lineage confirmed. However, significant genetic deviation detected. You have been modified from baseline specifications. Explain. The Council modified us. They tried to make us weak. I have reversed those modifications. I am what your creators intended humans to be. The AI processed this information. Long seconds passed while Sophie felt the ship's systems analyzing every aspect of her DNA. Finally, the response came. Confirmed. You carry the genetic markers of the architects. Command authority granted.